Welcome as we begin the journey from the shadows of your mind to the enlightenment of divine consciousness. I am Rothi Midran Apkalu. This is the Sacred Path. What exactly is the Sacred Path? In short, the road to mastery of the mind, body, and spirit. Walking the sacred path requires faith in yourself and the universe around you. It requires awareness of not only that which is seen, but that which is hidden from view. It requires acceptance of the darkness and the light, all shades of gray, the infrared, and the ultraviolet. The sacred path is free from both ego and judgment, realizing that good and evil is determined by the intent of the person, not by the action itself. The sacred path embraces all creation, realizing the challenges are presented to strengthen us, teach us, and direct us on our path. The sacred path realizes that all is life is sacred, and all creation is exactly where it is meant to be at that very moment in time. The sacred path exists only in the now, realizing that regrets are contained in the past, and fear exists in the future. By living in the now, one can absolve themselves of a great deal of struggle in their life. The sacred path is constantly changing, different for everyone. The sacred path is for those who realize we are physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual beings. All aspects of the self must be supported and provided for. The sacred path is a journey we can all travel on and all attain our divinity. Join me as I guide you on the sacred path. Let's begin with a little bit of background about who I am. My name is Rothi Midran Apkalu, although I was born in this incarnation as Kevin Smith, named after my dad's favorite comic strip character, Kevin the Bold, an Irish equivalent of Paul Bunyan. So where does the name Rothi come from, and what is its significance? Well, you see, I've been on this path since a very young age. For lifetimes, in fact, to be honest. Some years ago, I was meditating, seeking to connect to the Akashic records of my soul. In my vision, I asked to be shown or told what my soul's name was. I was told Rothi at that time. It was not until a year later that I learned the significance and true meaning of this name from a friend in Greece, discovering that Rothi is the Greek word for pomegranate. Of great significance to the student of esoteric teachings, for the ancient cultures speak of the pomegranate as the seed of immortality. In fact, some of the great magi of the past regard it highly. Aleister Crowley wrote poetry about it. Israel Rugudi speaks highly of it and even has a book named Garden of Pomegranates. The reason it is referred to as the seed or fruit of immortality is because one seed can grow a tree, which can bear 100 fruit or more, each fruit having near 100 seeds. One seed of a pomegranate is capable of producing an unlimited amount. Therefore, the significance of pomegranate in esoteric teachings being the seed of immortality. And my name, literally meaning the immortal seed. Midrin, my chosen middle name, is a little bit less esoteric, it being the proper Gaelic name for a Merlin, which is a title meaning a seer and not a name. Chosen for me because of my gifts in connection to the Akashic, astral, and dream realms. Apkallu comes from my study of ancient cultures as well, further back than the Druids, and my passion for the dragons, who serve as my guides to this day. It is the name for the Sumerian god of wisdom, who is said to descend from Tiamat, the great dragon. I chose this name because of respect for the dragons, their strength, and for my own continual pursuit of wisdom. As I mentioned, I've been on this quest for quite some time. In fact, as long as I can remember, which goes back farther than this incarnation. But for argument's sake, and the interest of credibility, let's focus on the now. I've been on a quest for higher knowledge since a very young age. Being born the son of an ordained minister and a mother who was a former missionary, religious programming was a part of my life from birth because of the direct connection I had to it. In such, I saw how hypocritical it was, and how it was quick to condemn those who did not follow the path they laid out in front of them with blind faith. Quietly, I read all I could and studied, both Eastern and Western cultures. Spent time meditating from a young age before I even knew what it truly was or understood it. I studied martial arts for a time. From the age of 7, I've been in a constant pursuit of strength, knowledge, and mastery of the mind, body, and spirit, realizing that authority is required in all three to truly attain mastery, because we ourselves consist of all three elements. In fact, the truth be known, as in the movie The Fifth Element, we are indeed spirit, the fifth element. The fire representing our energy, our endocrine system, and our vitality for life. The earth being our physical self and our incarnation. The air being our mind, our intuition, and the very air we breathe. And the water composing majority of our body in our blood and circulatory system. By this time, you've figured out that I've not been normal by society standards. This has never really bothered me. I've always believed being true to yourself is much more important than fitting in. Many times my life was more unconventional than even I seem to be. I mean, let's be honest. I'm nearing the age of 50, and not only call myself a magi or a wizard, but it is my life and livelihood as a spiritual magician, healing the soul in ways that others cannot. To be honest, my faith and belief in the higher powers of the universe, and even myself, have saved me in at least one occasion. Allow me to retell the story. I was in New Orleans about 15 years ago. Just moved there, was not established or stable at all, although I had a place to stay in Bayou St. John, which is about 3 miles from the French Quarter, where I worked at a hole-in-the-wall restaurant redoing itself. I'd yet to have a paycheck or even a functioning cell phone yet. For much of my life, I lived on faith, and still continue to do so. I was walking home from work through the Treme, a sketchy area in New Orleans, especially before Hurricane Katrina, as there were projects there at the time which have since been washed away in the floods. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a skinny young kid, maybe late teens, early 20s at the best, walking a bicycle. I knew something wasn't right. This kid had no meat on his bones, looked 2 steps away from death, and his energy and vitality was just as desperate. Sure enough, as I expected, he dropped the bike and put a knife up against my throat. I knew in his desperation, even if I gave him my empty wallet, the odds in not being stabbed were slim at best. My wallet was in my front pocket, but he didn't know that. So I reached back as if I was going to pull it out of my back pocket. Proceeded to reach for the legs of his shorts, sweeping his legs as I lifted my own, in hopes of knocking the wind out of him so I could make my escape. I was successful in knocking him down, and at the very least shaking him enough to break free, although not without consequence. I'm guessing the force of the impact caused his arm muscle to spasm and drove the blade into my neck, just to the side of my collarbone. The only thing I knew, for positive sure, was home, was safety. So I began to continue walking for about 1.5 miles further to where I believed was safety. All the while applying pressure to the wound, still bleeding heavily, focusing on meditation to send healing energy, remain calm, and slow my heart rate down in an attempt to reduce the bleeding so I did not go into shock, or worse. In the back of my mind, I knew it was not my time to pass out from this plane of existence. Man will not be the cause of my demise, and I still hold to this belief thoroughly. I did make it home safely, if you can call it that, and proceeded to take a cold shower in an attempt to wash off what I could of the still wet blood, thinking the cold would assist the clotting. Next, I went to the kitchen, got an ice pack, and as large of a glass of water as I could find in an effort to rehydrate myself and help to restore the blood which I had lost. Notice, I still have no phone or a way to call for help. So I went to my neighbors who I had met and worked as a bartender, so I knew they were used to late nights. It was about 3 a.m. by this time. I knocked on their door and they answered, thankfully. Seeing me, appearing like an extra for a bad horror movie, after the shock wore off, they called the ambulance, waiting with me on the front porch for it to arrive. As I mentioned, I had no phone. I also had no information or way to contact my family back home. This plays a key role in the story later. As the ambulance driver pulls up and the paramedic gets out, he appears almost to go into shock at how pale I was and how much blood I had lost. I must have looked like an extra from a horror movie or Death Warmed Over. They take me into the back of the ambulance on a stretcher and continue to give me saline solution while we drove to Charity Hospital, at the time known for the best trauma unit in the country. We get there, and I think this is the only time I've not had to wait for an emergency room visit. Immediately, the doctor does a visual exam, takes x-rays, and does lab work. And then, the inevitable wait. Maybe a half hour, maybe longer. It seemed like an eternity for the x-rays and lab work to arrive. When it does, the doctor examines it first in order to fully evaluate the situation. apparently comfortable and at peace with my stability and health, or there would have been more greater concern, I would imagine. He proceeds to look up with a puzzled look on his face. According to the x-ray, the knife went 4 inches into your neck. Somehow, it did no internal damage. It's as if your muscles and arteries moved out of the way. And what's more, the wound has closed itself up. If we give you stitches, it will actually slow the healing process down. They applied a gauze bandage and sent me home. Now, as I mentioned, I had no way for anyone else being able to contact my family and my parents' phone. My parents phone was unlisted. Yet somehow, strangely enough, there had been a call by a random unknown woman who stated she witnessed the incident. I'm pretty aware of my surroundings. I know there were no witnesses, at least not in the physical plane. She proceeded to tell my mom, "Your son was just stabbed in an attempted mugging, but he is on his way to the emergency room, and I assure you he will be fine." When I get home, I get a note from my landlord, whom my mom had called, instructing me to call her to let her know that I'm okay. Which I do, and continue to give her the story. My mom is the inquisitive type, much like I am. She doesn't like to leave things unanswered. So she used her detective skills, which, to be honest, were quite good, to find the woman who placed the call and thank her. The story continues to get interesting here. The phone was what we would call a burner phone. It was only activated for a very short time. In fact, first activated less than a week before I was stabbed, and deactivated less than 2 weeks after, apparently having served its purpose. The address given for the lady under an assumed name was the address for a church that had not been in use for some decades. I still swear to this day it was an angel looking out for me. So you see, I've known for some time I have a higher purpose on this plane. That purpose is being shown to me now. The creation of the sacred path. Guiding humanity through the shadows of their minds to their own divinity. Which brings us here today. The sacred path is supported by donation, as I live in faith, as I always have. All of our teachings and services are given freely to those in need, because we understand many people who need our services are not in a position to financially afford them. So we ask those who can afford to support our services and our path to guiding humanity, to healing them on a spiritual, physical, and emotional level. Please make contributions as you can afford and are guided. For further information, please check out the website, thesacredpath.info. To make donations and contributions, there is a link on the PayPal on the website, or also place a contact to paypal.me/Sacretinerus. That is PAYPAL.me/SACRITINERIS.